Hi, Grant.
Hi, Shireen. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Hi from Saudi.
Fantastic.
So where are you now?
I am in South Africa, somewhere in the middle of the country right now.
I see full flight in the background.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on actually it's a game farm really, so it's about 4 hours from Johannesburg.
Okay.
Be back.
Looks like a nice place.
Yeah, it's there's nothing else here besides animals and I mean basically just relaxing. So and working.
So I would like to welcome you to our webinar and thank you because the contribution of ASCM is very important. ASCM is the biggest organization for supply chain in the world, and most of people know about APEX, and some of them know that the name has changed to ASCM. So you being a director for ASCM, giving us lots of support and contribution. Today's topic is about supply chain metrics and how we can measure supply chain, how we can improve our supply chain. So thank you for accepting to be our speaker tonight or this evening. And thank you for the great preparation. So please go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Shireen, and thank you for joining also from Saudi. So I know there's always a lot of representation on the Symbios calls. I know all over the Middle East, which is really great. So thank you so much for having me. I did actually, I think it was probably a number of months ago that we had done a similar Saturday night webinar, and I really enjoyed it. So I really just want to say thank you so much for having me back again. Today, I actually want to do some interactivity with the audience there tonight, and I see there are quite a few people on the line. I think we have about 40 people, and really what I want to do is if you could just prepare, so go to polev.com/ASCM on your phone or on your internet web browser, and we will be doing a few polls during the session here tonight. So thanks again to the Symbios team. And I do want to first of all start a little bit to just give you some information around ASCM, Apex, and the relationship that we have with Symbios-Consulting. So first of all, who is ASCM? Well, the vision of the organization is to achieve a better world through supply chain. So ASCM is a global leader in supply chain organization development. So that's looking at the training and those sorts of activities that we do or provide. Transformation, which is more of the consulting type, business transformation, business improvement type offerings. Innovation and leadership. It's a non-profit organization, and it's actually the largest non-profit supply chain organization in the world. We have a global network of partners, instructors, and thought leaders, of which Symbios-Consulting is one of our key partners, instructors, and thought leaders in all three of those buckets. ASCM is unbiased, so what we aim to do is to provide a view of models, frameworks, body of knowledge on supply chain management that isn't aiming to achieve a specific objective, but rather to give the industry the best practice around all of these things, right? What are the latest trends? What are the best practices? And everything we do is based on either a survey, a trend, industry collaborators, and these kinds of things. ASCM is actually built on the foundation of 60 years of Apex history. So the Apex brand that Shireen mentioned there, Apex started in 1957, and the ASCM brand started in 2019. So we can forgive you for not necessarily knowing ASCM, but ASCM has a broader offering than the Apex brand. So we still have Apex, we still have the credentials, CSCP, CPIM, CLTD, all of those credentials that are well sought after in the industry fall under the Apex brand. But then we've also got things like the standards, which you can see in point 5 there, the SCOR standard, the DCM, which is digital capabilities model, and sustainability as well. We have done a lot of benchmarks. So as you can see here, we have leveraged over 5,000 organizations that have gone through the benchmarking process. And actually, that's one of the topics that we'll be touching on a little bit tonight, because when we think of metrics, when we think of performance management, benchmarking is technically a key part of that, or can be a very key part of that. So some quick facts about ASCM, and as I mentioned, Apex founded in 1957, over 45,000 professional members in over 100 countries, more than 100 global training partners, and over 100,000 people that have actually gone through the certified supply chain professional, or one of the certified supply chain professional designations that we have. So really, we've done quite a bit. And we also aim to be current with current events, right? So actually, these were, if you look at this, for example, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, this was published first in February 24th, 2022, right? So really, this is actually old news. And we're already looking at the new stuff, right? So looking at global oil prices and these kinds of things, and really trying to give the voice of record for that. And then really quickly, just to end off on this piece about ASCM, is looking at our B2B ecosystem. So there are numerous organizations surrounding ASCM. We've got corporate development. So we do work directly with companies, with organizations around the world. We have the chapter partners, which is typically based in North America, advisory collaborators, technology collaborators, and our global training partners as well. Also within this bucket, by the way, is global consulting partners. And Symbios-Consulting actually does both. So they do consulting work as well as the training for ASCM. Not for ASCM, but using ASCM products. And then we have our academic partners as well. We have basically actually academic partnership outside of North America, which is in just north of Dubai. And then we have some nonprofits and for-profit partners as well. So as you can see, it's a very big ecosystem. This year, in between all of these collaborators and all of these stakeholders that surround the organization. So let me talk about tonight's session. What is it that we want to actually delve into a little bit more detail on? So firstly, let's talk about performance management, why we do it. So with any discussion around metrics has to be connected to performance management, because we do metrics for a reason. We look at KPIs, we look at how we support the business through data and information, and what that results in. What do we do with that information? That's really important. So we actually should be discussing a little bit here about your business objectives, talking a little bit about segmentation, strategy, and operating model, and then the data availability and visibility, which is, for me, something I know from the past, from what I've experienced in my career, at least, something that is extremely important for us to get right. Get the foundation right, get the strategy right, get the operating model right, and ensure that we have the right data and the data is correct for us to use it. Then we'll talk a little bit about the best practice metrics for performance management. I often go back to the SCOR model here. It's absolutely, for me, definitely one of the best models that you can use still when we talk about metrics, when we talk about process flows, and even practices as well. I think it's for sure one of the most prolific models, frameworks that we can look at. So I want to talk a little about what we call level 1 metrics within SCOR, but also take you into the actual model itself. So I do have an open tab in my browser just behind this presentation that I will share with you as well. And let's see if we can talk a little bit more in more detail about some of the metrics too. Then I'm going to ask you about what your focus area is based on that, right? We're going to do a poll, target setting and benchmarking. So once we know what metrics to use, how do we know what we should be achieving in those metrics? How do we set the target number for what we want to achieve? And benchmarking can be a part of that. And of course, metrics are useless if we do not do the root cause and corrective action as well. So we need to understand what root cause analysis is, why we do corrective actions and how to do it. And of course, performance management in your organization, then where do you think you currently sit from all of these aspects? So let me check. I think the UN might be, oh, there's no question. It's just a hello, everyone. Okay. Thanks, Zainab. Hello, everyone. All right. Do you feel free to ask any questions that you might need to get more information on? And if you do need a translation, I know Shireen is really great at translating the the information that we put through these sort of things into Arabic.
Grant, can we ask the audience to tell us which countries they are from and what do they do in supply chain?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So thank you for the new people who are joining us. We are gaining more and more people. So I would like to ask you if you share which country you are from and what do you do in supply chain? So welcome, Grant, from South Africa. So would you write your country, please? Sharif from Egypt. Turkey from Saudi Arabia as a project manager. Hi, Turkey. Egypt, supporting IT aspects of supply chain. Egypt studying supply chain management. Noral from Jordan, procurement officer. Mu'taz, supply chain manager from Egypt. Mustafa, Egyptian, but he's from Saudi Arabia. Ahmed from Egypt, from IMC. Riham from Egypt, business analyst. SAP unit manager, Mustafa, hi. From Egypt, supply chain consultancy. From Egypt, interested in inventory management KPIs. Adham, supply chain director from Egypt. Abrar from Saudi Arabia, supply chain operation. Sameh from Egypt, Egyptian working in Saudi Arabia as a supply chain director. Mona Al-Najjar, Egyptian in Saudi Arabia studying supply chain. From Egypt, business developer. From oil and gas, Hossam Barakat, welcome. Hassan Sakr from Egypt. Isaac, purchasing section head from Egypt. Muhammad Kashif from Pakistan. Ahmed Razak, CEO from Egypt, consultant. Sameh, digital transformation consultant. Welcome, Sameh. So I think, wow, we have great crowd tonight, Grant.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, welcome everyone from wherever you are. It looks like we have a lot of Egypt and Saudi Arabia in particular here.
Yeah. Yes. So we have people from Pakistan, and we have from Jordan as well. So
yes,
that's nice.
True.
Okay. Last time we had people from Algeria and Morocco. Okay. So please, Grant, go on. We will not need to translate, but if you can speak a little slower, it will be fantastic. Okay.
I sure will. No problem at all. So I'm just going to start off with, we're going to do a poll. So if you could for me, some of you might have already looked at, the web browser for this, but if you go to pollev.com/ASCM, if you could all just do that for me for a second. I know that you have your phones nearby, so I know that's not a problem, right? It may ask you for your name, but you don't need to put your name in if you don't want to. It's not a problem at all. So you should see this come up. All right, so now you can answer the questions, and I see that some of you already started, which is fantastic. So which of these best describes your top business efficiency objective? So if you were to choose one of these or even all of them, which of these do you think best describes your business efficiency objective? Is it to save money? Is it to save time? Or is it to boost customer service? Or maybe even something else? Which of those would you say, looking at this, would be your biggest, would describe the efficiency objectives that you want to get in your business? So let's let a few people answer those questions. So far, we only have a couple of answers there. Let's see if we have any. Any questions there? So yeah, it's polev.com. Zainab, I'm just going to put it into the chat. Be easier. polev.com/ASCM. So Zainab, I think something happened with the one that you put in there. Okay. Let's give it a second. Because we have 55 people on the call, so we should get hopefully at least 20 responses, right? Let's see what we're getting here. Okay, if you're having trouble, let me know. We can try and solve it for you. Okay. All right, we're getting some here. Fantastic. Yes, and I see that on the chat, for example, I know Mona, you said to improve customer service and save time and save money, then time. So you sort of ranked them according to that. But I think a lot of organizations and people would probably focus on the save money piece, definitely. And I'm not surprised to also see boost customer service quite high on this list, because typically when we think of the definition of supply chain management, I mean, you learn this as supply chain 101. It is to save time or save money, save costs, and to increase customer service. Typically, those are the two things that we see, right? So this is a very simplistic level. Of course, we know that within saving money, we do that to improve profitability, for example, in the organization. So definitely these are going to result in more improvements and other things strategically that we want to focus on in the organization. But at a very high level, this is essentially what we're doing. Why do we want to become more efficient? Why do we want to become better at what we do? That's really the crux of this. So I think we do have a question already. Let me check. Momin, I think you've got a question. Zainab, are people able to talk on this, or will they just have to type in their questions into the chat?
I will check if it's available.
Okay, no problem. All right, so Momin, hold that thought for a bit, and we can.
At the end of the session, we will take all the questions at the end of the session.
Okay, no problem. Good, so thank you for that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, first of all, segmentation, right? And this is important for us to talk about, because this is the precursor to the reason why we're doing the metrics, right? What we're analyzing and why we're doing it. So what is segmentation? Okay, so it defines like groups or combinations based on certain supply chain characteristics. So things that might drive the need to do things in a unique way. It helps us to enable operations to meet the demand and the targets that we set more efficiently by treating similar characteristics of the supply chain in a similar way, right? The way that we handle the operations of that. We also can develop differentiated supply chain strategies to meet the needs of individual segments. All the supply chains that we have in our business exactly the same. There's definitely a lot of need for us to look at them differently, because there are different characteristics and different targets and even different focus areas that we might want to look at. So we also want to emphasize the identification and alignment of segment attributes. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, where we look at the different attributes of a segment within a supply chain. Some considerations that we need to think about is that segmentation is actually necessary to do the creation of differentiated operating models. So what we're saying is we first need to know how our supply chain is segmented before we can put in place operational aspects that might help us to do better with that supply chain. The operating models for each of the segments should provide the target level of service at the lowest cost to serve. So this is highlighted here in blue. Actually, there's more to this than just the level of service. It's whatever KPI we have agreed to would be the key focus area for that supply chain. And you could be measuring the same KPIs on different supply chains, but you might have different targets for each one of them. And segmentation and corresponding operating model parameters may change, right? It may evolve with the business as needed. So as your products change, as the type of supply chain changes, this is where you might see the need to update the operating model. And we also like to bring in a bit of SCOR here. So operating models must be aligned and enabled across the plan, source, make, and deliver. And of course, also return if that is necessary. So one size does not fit all, right? Unfortunately, for supply chains, that is not the case. Maybe it was for something you might buy like a hat or something like that, but it does not apply to supply chains. So this just talks a little bit about what are the kind of things we should be thinking about when we're talking about segmentation. And for example, if we look here, strategic importance of the products that are in that supply chain, what types of raw materials we use, who is our customer and the channel type, the brand or the market, geographic location, very commonly used to segment supply chains, both demand and supply variability. So if we have a product that is much more stable versus a product that is very high variability, right? So let's look at two examples. Let's think of something like bread, right? That's sold in a store, quite a stable supply or a stable demand. Then let's look at something like fashion items, right? A very erratic demand and a demand that's less easy to predict. Also things like volume, right? How much are we actually selling or how much is traveling through our supply chain for each of those different products? So these are examples of what we could do to segment our supply chain. And taking this one step further, so there's all those different things that we can use to do the segmentation. Now what we want to do is create groupings. So where we have similar characteristics in the supply chain, we want to group them into the same place, right? So let's say certain kinds of products, or certain kinds of geographies, certain kinds of customers, for example. These could all be aspects that we want to group into little bundles. These are the types of things that, as we looked in that little diagram of what we might be looking at, right? So product complexity. Is it a complex product or is it just simply a resupply? Is it a very high demand variability or very low demand variability? Product life cycle. So is it our initial, launch of the product, or is it something that we just keep on generating through the life cycle of the product? Step 2 then is to define the operating model that might support that group, right? So if we have, let's say group 1, for example, this could be a very complex product. We could have a very high demand variability and the product life cycle is maybe in the resupply phase of the product life cycle. We might want to think of different ways to do this. So let's say, for example, we have a very high variability in our demand, in our forecast, right, in that case, because we need to be aware of what the customer is doing and maybe try to predict with close alignment to them in terms of what the demand will look like. Versus statistically, if we know we have a very stable demand, there's less of a need to talk to the customer all the time because we can very easily predict based on history, based on future forecasts and methodologies, exactly what we're going to sell. Let's look at another example, sourcing, for example, right? Do we have a single versus multi-material, something that we have very high variability on, not easy to get, very risky? Maybe we look at multiple sources, right, versus a single source of supply. In-source versus outsource decision. Very common decision that is made within companies, not something normally that can be made very quickly, usually, right? So normally it's about producing your own manufacturing plant, building a factory versus outsourcing that to somewhere else. Maybe for the cases of where you have excess demand, you might do an outsource, but these are decisions that have to be made. And then the delivery phase is what do we do there? So it could be either a single versus multi-country delivery. Maybe we use third parties. Maybe we use other organizations to channel partners that can support us in these different locations. These are all decisions that need to be made, right? And I know we're spending a lot of time on this before we get to the actual metrics, but this is very important when we think of the metrics themselves. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit and going into the data visibility and availability perspective of this. So I have been in S&OP meetings in my career where we've probably spent 40 to 50% of the meeting talking about whether the data is correct or whether we're actually looking at the right number, or can we even trust the number that we have? So for me, it's really important for us to squash that, right? We need to move beyond, is the data correct? And the way to do that is by ensuring the data integrity, the information is our supply chain. So there's three that for me are very important when we think of data integrity and information visibility. The first one is the alignment on the current state of the business. So this helps us to align, right? We don't yet now talk about the impact of the numbers. We talk about the impact of the numbers in the meeting, not whether the number is right. Executive level alignment on outcomes and the deliverables of the same set of data. So I often see this. We have different parts using data to make decisions. So it's really important that we agree on the ones of truth, and that's what we use to make decisions. What's really important as well with this is accountability in the right places. So no guessing where the gap is coming from. We all need to understand, what part of the business do certain functions support, where does the data come from, and who's putting that information in, and what do we then, where do we go back when that is not according to what we want? And then the next one is identification of the potential problems before it is too late. So having more data integrity and information visibility also helps us in a similar way to a car engine light. So this is, obviously if your car engine light comes on, usually it's best to probably go and get it checked out pretty soon, right? Unless it's flashing and you really have to do it like immediately. But what it's saying is that there's a bigger problem, or there could be a bigger problem. Maybe you can still drive for 1,000 kilometers, 3,000 kilometers, who knows? But you have to actually heed the warning that there could be something going on, and metrics do the same thing. It also provides comfort to the business that we are in control. So that's really important for us to make sure of, is we have visibility to this and we are in control of what we see. We can understand it immediately. And then significant time and effort reduction. So using the right set of data initially provides less rework, less effort focus on areas that may not be most optimal. And also we can immediately address the issue, right, wherever the issue is. So without specifically blaming a department or area of the business, we can address that issue and avoid time spent on fixing data. I've done this many times in my career as well. And then, of course, how do we get the information? How do we see it? It's through typically reporting and dashboards for visibility. And I must say that Symbios-Consulting is probably one of the best out there for this. So I would absolutely recommend, if you need to do a report or dashboard and create additional visibility in your supply chain, Symbios is definitely the company for you to do that. So in this case, it's about information shown on dashboards that should be actionable. So for example, we would want to be able to devise a response to improve the performance level. So let's look at something like inventory, right? I think one of the comments when everybody was introducing themselves today was, I want to know more about inventory metrics, right? So let's think of things like inventory days cover, very common inventory metric, or inventory turns, right? These sort of things. Where is it currently in our status versus the target? And can we do something about it, right? So this is really important, that when we see that metric, we see our days cover sitting significantly higher than where it should be. What do we do about it? Does it trigger actions in our business? So very important for a dashboard or a report to do that. Also, don't just send out reports for no reason, right? I see this happen a lot. So, you'll get someone in the organization who you've sent out the same report and everyone sends it out every day. So, someone sends a report to the whole business. The question is, first of all, can we automate that? That's really, a person shouldn't be emailing reports, in my opinion. And then secondly, does it actually result in actions, and do people use that information, or is there a better way to represent that? Also, what's key is the frequency of the update. So in line with the requirements of the metric to be actioned. So this is very important, is do we update this in a timeliest fashion that's going to enable us to do something about the metric? Okay, So I want to talk about the actual metrics now. And let's look at best practice in SCOR. So I actually want to show you, we'll go into this in a second, but these are typical metrics that are attributes that we have. So this is a question that's going to come out of a segmentation, is once we've defined that supply chain grouping that we looked at a moment ago, where do we want to be good in our supply chain? So do we want to be reliable, which is consistently getting the orders right and the product meeting the quality requirements? Do we want to be responsive? So the speed at which we can provide products and service to customers. So think of e-commerce, right? Definitely something that's becoming more important, right? Being responsive to the customer, quickly getting them what they want. Agility. This is the ability to respond to the changes in the market. So how quickly can we react to an unanticipated change in demand in the market with the resources that we have? So the speed at which we can respond to that and those kind of risks that we see more and more frequently in the market. Then cost, okay. I think most accountants would choose cost as the key attribute, which is the cost associated with managing and operating the supply chain. And there's various layers to that. We have what's known as total supply chain management costs. We've also got cost of goods sold, which is pretty easy to understand, right? But within total supply chain management costs, we can actually define really detailed levels of cost breakdowns according to the activity done in the supply chain. And then asset management. This is the effectiveness in managing the supply chain's asset to support the fulfillment of the need to the consumer or to the customer, right, in the supply chain. So these are very, very commonly used attributes. And really the question I'm putting out there is, when you think of a supply chain that you have in your organization, is which one of these do you believe is the most important, right? So I'm going to quickly go first. Let's just hope this works. Let's see if I can get in here. So, by the way, the SCOR model is available free to anyone who wants to use it. So it's quite a nice resource if you want to look at metrics, if you want to understand calculations, or anything like that that really is going to be of interest to you in your own organization. Just go to score.ascm, score.ascm.org, and then you'll be able to actually click on the performance aspect of that. So I've looked specifically at performance, and here you can see these attributes that we looked at a moment ago. What's great about the model is it does actually provide different levels of metrics. So if we think of level 1, these are the diagnostics for overall health of the supply chain. These are metrics that are strategic, and we know them also as key performance indicators or KPIs, and they help establish the realistic target to support strategic direction in the organization. We then also have another layer, which is the level 2 and level 3 metrics. These are what we call diagnostic metrics because they help to identify what the root cause is or causes for performance gaps in the level 1 metric. So if, for example, we are wanting to be reliable in our organization, we would have a target for reliability. Here's how you calculate reliability, okay? But these are level 2 metrics that we have that we look at how to inform that perfect order fulfillment metric, which is a reliability metric. So the percentage of orders delivered in full, the percentage of orders performance to customer commit date, the percentage of documentation accuracy, and the percentage in perfect condition. So quality metric, right? These are all level 2s. So this is why it's so important for us to do this from a business perspective, is translate what we do, all the metrics that we measure, into our overall strategic metrics, which would be at that top level. So really great to do. And by the way, there's a lot of information in here that you can go and have a look for free. If you just go to score.ascm.org, you will have to create an Apex ID, but it's free to do. So definitely, if you have some time available, go and have a look and read some of these metrics that exist over here. So these are the metrics that exist under each of these attribute areas, as I mentioned, right? And that's what we just looked at now, the perfect order fulfillment. But as you see in responsiveness, we have order fulfillment cycle time, measuring the consistent speed of providing products and services to customer. agility, we've got upside adaptability and downside of adaptability. So if there is a change in demand, a very high increase, for example, in demand, what do we do about it, and how do we get the benefit back to normal again? And then downside supply chain adaptabilities, if there's a decrease in demand, right, what do we do then? Overall value at risk, looking at a risk metric, so the impact of a risk event occurring times by the probability of it occurring. A cost of goods sold and total supply chain management costs, we touched on that a bit earlier. And then for asset management, it's about cash to cash cycle time, the return on supply chain fixed assets, and our return on working capital, right? All of these aspects that fit in here. So a lot to go through, but you can see already the robustness of the types of metrics that we use. So now that you've learned about these metrics, I'd like to ask you, which of the following performance attributes in your business do you believe is the biggest driver or differentiator for your supply chain success? So if you could choose just one of these, right? I know it's a hard choice to choose only one because you want to be good at everything, of course, but what is the most important one, right? What does our customer want the most from us? You know, where do we need to focus our attention when we devise our supply chain? Which of these attributes would you say is most important for you? And I can see it has come up on the browser. So we've got one response so far. It's the same link, so you should just actually receive an update to the link if you still have it open. It's polev.com/ASCM. So let's see what comes out of this. I'll be very interested to know what you believe is important in your organization, in your supply chain. Let's try get at least 15 responses. Yeah, we've got 55 people here on the call. I know it might take a moment just to get in there, but let's see what we've got. Okay, we're getting some. So far, a bit of a mix of everything. Let's try get at least 15 responses here and see where we land on this one. Interesting to know, because there's definitely a trade-off between all of these things. One trade-off that I can easily mention is the trade-off between reliability and cost, for example. The more reliable we want to be, so getting the customer their product when they wanted it, in the right quality, the right documentation, and the right time. If we want to do that, it is possible to do. We just got to hold a lot of inventory, right? We can hold a lot of inventory, but that is going to come at a cost. And I think that's where these big trade-offs come in, right? It's quite funny, actually. I think in these times where, at the moment, I think cost is becoming quite a big focus area for a lot of organizations. There are a lot of cost pressures currently in the industry. Fuel, for example, is one of them. I know because of the Ukraine-Russia war, there's a lot of cost pressure on grain and things like that, right? So a lot of those raw materials, there seem to be an increase in costs, and that's probably why we're seeing a bit of an increase here on the cost side. So we're saying, well, we might not be as reliable anymore, but we are focusing on our internal costs within the organization. So very, very interesting responses we're getting over here. Well, I often see reliability come up quite strong, so that's not that strong in this case, but cost is becoming important. And responsiveness I like there too, because of the speed of delivery, obviously to get the product to the consumer. But some very interesting responses there. Thank you for that. So just to talk again about the different levels that you can look at in a metric, right? So I'm using SCOR to represent this for you, but you could actually look at this in many other ways, right? In your organization, there's a strategic metric. The strategic metric is not a supply chain only metric, right? It covers the entire organization, or should cover more of the organization at an executive level. We have the attribute. So this is the attribute reliability. We have the level 1 metric, which could be, in this case, be perfect order fulfillment. We have the level 2 diagnostic metric, which would be for these 4 areas, so perfect quality, etc., perfect timing. And then we have a level 3 diagnostic metric, which could be something like deliver item accurately accuracy or deliver quantity accuracy, for example. So those very specific metrics within the operations of the organization. Okay. So another very key aspect of metrics is setting the targets for metrics. So now that we've gone through an exercise like this, saying, okay, these are the metrics that we want to use in our business. These are the important metrics that we want to use. So we're saying cost is very important for us. We need to be able to measure costs, right, very effectively. Now we're going to go into benchmarking. So how do we know what the cost number should be? So for example, if you look at the cost line over here, just to represent this for you, the percentage typically in this total case would look at the total supply chain management cost as a percentage of the total revenue of the organization. But what should that percentage be, right? That's the first question we want to ask ourselves. So you can do this two ways, right? Internal benchmarking or external benchmarking to other internal comparative points. So for example, if you're within a big organization or an organization that has multiple levels, different sub-organizations and things like that, you could look at different geographic locations. So for multi-level companies before, and what we used to do is actually look at all the regions. So there was different regions. There was the APAC region, MEA region, Africa, Europe, North America, South America, etc. And it would almost be a bit of a competition, right? Looking at, for example, forecast accuracy across different geographic regions to see who's doing the best, and then, of course, why are they doing it? How are they getting to that number, right? Always a good to ask. But geographic location is a very nice way to do that. Other product groupings or other segments of supply chain, we can look at that. So you may sell 300 different SKUs in the organization. There may be 10 different product groupings. How do we compare with the different product groupings within the organization? Looking at past performance, right? So going back into history and looking at past performance, seeing where we landed with different metrics and the actual numbers on those. Companies within the same overall group, and then industry body data we could look at as well, right? This might technically be semi-external, but definitely something that's close and available to the industry and to the organization. Then we have external benchmarking. So this is where we can compare metrics to benchmark groups or populations with similar or desired characteristics. So we're saying either it's exactly the same or it's similar to what we do now, right? Or what kind of organization those are, or it's what we aspire to. We have had organizations that have gone through an external benchmarking exercise where they didn't necessarily even compare themselves within the same industry, but they compare themselves to best-in-class companies that are doing things with certain metrics, like people that do a good job of responsiveness, for example. Maybe we want to benchmark ourselves against that, right? Or people that do a good job with cost. How do we benchmark ourselves against the best-in-class cost companies that we believe, right? This would be very, very beneficial for us. So we'd actually be assigning a target level of performance for each of those, looking at where your organization currently sits, and then where is the competition, or where are those benchmark populations sitting. We then know where there's a gap to the target, right? And that's where we'd find out, how to now set our targets based on that approach. So set the target, review and adjust targets consistently. Okay, so set targets, review, learn, adjust, and then set the target based on what we know has been done and what we think we can do. So if we've seen that level of performance being achieved, let's say, for example, we see under cost share, okay, 5.6% is this is actually a good example because cost was mentioned here, by the way, as the key metric. But actually, this 8.7% is the parity level. We want to be at superior level. Superior level is at 2.4%. Okay, 2.4% cost, total supply chain management costs to revenue. We are sitting at currently 8.1%. So therefore, the gap is 5.7% to get there. So we've seen that is possible to do. We may target something like that or something similar to that number, and also stretch ourselves potentially a little bit as well, right? Where this may be applicable to. and then understand the structure of our operating model and ability to deliver on the metric, right? So can we actually deliver this number here of 2.4% with the current structure of our organization? Or do we need to think about ways in which we can adjust that structure to support the better delivery of that cost number, right? This is where the operating model becomes very important and key. I've got 2 more slides to go through. So this one I like to share as well, because this is showing us how we do the root cause analysis, right? So now we have a metric. That metric maybe is perfect order fulfillment. We have a gap currently to what we want to be in perfect order fulfillment. In this case, we have a gap of 37% to our desired number for perfect order fulfillment. We can now split that up into the different aspects of the supply chain or of that metric that impact perfect order fulfillment. So by doing a root cause analysis, okay, and there's lots of ways to do a root cause analysis. You may have heard of the fishbone diagram, Ishikawa diagram. There's various other ways to do it, but we're trying to get to a quantified view of where the problem lies. So this is actually just taking an example of saying most of that 37%, right, of our gap is because we are not on time at the customer. We do have a bit of a gap in quality as well, and then less of a gap in the in full portion. So we're delivering in full, and is the documentation correct, right? 5% of that is made up over there. So these are some potential causes. So why is it that we have these gaps? And then let's quantify them even further. So if we look, for example, at the on-time gap, on time is the problem. Most of that reason we've identified is because the freight provider delivered late. So 10% within that 25% is freight provider delivering late. We also have a bit of a problem with the warehouse shipping late, and there's also sometimes a credit hold, which impacts that number. So these are important for us to do, because now we can go and focus on the right thing. If I want to change that 25% and I want to make it a much better number, which is going to impact this total number here, I can start by focusing on the freight provider. Maybe get a new freight provider, or maybe work on performance initiatives that might help that freight provider perform at a better level, or understand what their cause is, right? Get them to come back with a solution for that. So these are some of the first things we will go ahead and do. And then if we look at these other ones here, you can see also there's specific reasons why we didn't achieve the in full, or we didn't achieve quality, or we didn't achieve the correct documentation. So this is what we would do for every KPI, right? Every metric that we do, we should be knowing this. We also shouldn't be guessing. We also, need to have these things really thought out quite well. So I'd now like to leave you with, this is half the story, right? Root cause analysis isn't yet the end. We've now done the root cause analysis, and we need to take corrective action to solve the problem. So we've kind of done this in that example I just showed, is identify the areas for improvement, define and describe the root cause, or what is the problem. We now need to identify potential solutions to that problem. So like we spoke about the freight forwarder, what could we do about that? If that solution is going to cost us money, we need to do a business case for it, understand how we weighing up the solution outcomes versus the cost and the effort required to support that. Select the right solution that we think is doable. And then we need to find the people responsible, the timeline, and the expected impact of that, implement the corrective action, and then review the results of that corrective action once it's implemented. If that action does not result in us having the desired impact, it means we need to go back and identify other potential solutions. And if it does, then we meet a performance objective. If it does meet the performance objective, we've actually created a sustained business result. And that's what the definition of corrective action is. It's creating a sustainable result that is going to support our business going forward, not just once. If you walk into an S&OP meeting, and in that meeting we have the same problem coming up every single month, then there's a problem with the corrective action. Then we have not taken the right corrective action. We might have different problems or different root causes, which we could focus on, but we really shouldn't be doing the same problem for very, very long, right? If we're taking the right actions and we agree that these are the things that we should be looking at. So one more poll, and let's see, I think we have some responses, but I think those from earlier. Let me just refresh quickly. Okay, so where are you currently in your state of performance management in your organization? So these are the options, right? We have alignment and availability of data and information points. Okay, is this something that you have? Do you use reports and dashboards to visualize performance? Are the reports we use mostly resulting in us taking action to rectify the gaps? Do you have segmentation in your supply chain and have a strategic objective for each area of segmentation? And do you do root cause analysis and corrective action? Let's see how many of these you do in your organization. You can choose more than one, right? By the way. So if you do all of them, select all of them. Okay. Okay, getting some responses there. So I would imagine that you have alignment and availability of most information points most of the time. The question is that the quality of the data, right? We use reports and dashboards to visualize performance. I think there'll be quite a few people who do that. The reports we're using mostly result in us taking action to rectify gaps. That's fantastic that's coming up so high. The segmentation is a little bit lower, and the root cause analysis and corrective action is slightly lower at the moment there. Let's wait for a few more responses in this. Okay, let's see what else we get. Okay, let's get like five more responses or so. Okay. So it looks like there's some work to do in terms of segmentation. There's maybe some work to do in terms of root cause analysis and the corrective action, and perhaps also beefing up the alignment of data and information points as well. But thank you so much for that, and thank you for being on the call today. Let's check if there's any questions.
Thank you, Grant. I really like the session, how interactive it is, but I think as well we need to announce that we have CPIM, we have CSCP, we have CLTD. These courses could help everyone who wants to study in details about supply chain metrics, about supply chain design, building skill set of capabilities. And anyone who attended this webinar, we usually give people a special discount. So we are happy that if you are interested to get any courses, any certifications from ASCM, we're happy to support. And I think you can discuss the conference in September as well. Grant.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I completely agree with that. I think these courses help immensely because a lot of, I mean, if you look at the content of CSCP, a lot of that is very strategic, right? And understanding how we measure success and how we actually create success in the supply chain. So absolutely agree with that, Shireen, 100%. So I think we don't have too much time left. So let me quickly check if that's okay, Shireen, if we look at some questions.
We have 2 questions in Q&A section.
All right, I can see the Q&A, so I'm going to quickly go into that. So we've got Mustafa. Hi, Mustafa. So the main issue that we face with our customers is to implement this model. They cannot make an organized framework between SAP implementation company and business consultant who is building this model. Yeah, well, that's the importance of project management, right? and also the fact that we need to have the alignment up front. So if I was faced with this issue, Mustafa, this is what I would do. I would first create the session in terms of what are the strategic objectives of our organization, of the supply chain. Make sure that all the parties have visibility to that or have in some way been involved with that process. That could mean we need to do a half-day workshop, a one-day workshop even, and align what it is that we're aiming to do in this organization. Then you get the consultant on board, you get the ERP system on board, etc., and all of those people together to define how we create the operating model that will support the objective of the company. So for me, that is step 1. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Then I see we got Mohammed. Mohammed, hi. So you say after RCA, suppose we have found a problem which is affect product cost. So how can we resolve this issue, and what about precautions? I think you're saying there. So after you've done the root cause analysis, now we find a problem that impacts the product cost, right? So yes, this is really, you would now know that it's sitting within the product, right, and the product cost specifically, and maybe that product is maybe you have a relationship with the supplier that you can talk to them about that product cost, understand the root cause around that, what is happening there, and how to deal with it. If we want to solve the problem, we might see that cost is a big element of the problem that we have in the business. Maybe we're going to focus on a metric that can support us to be agile, right? That we can quickly change direction, or we can be more responsive to when there is a change in cost in such a way, right? So this could be an option for you in this case as well. Okay, any other questions? Nope, I don't see any others. I see Aman has put on any course details. So please, if you do want to see any of the courses available there, if you inquire on that link that Aman has put in. And then there's a phone number and her email address as well. I think this might be one. No, I think someone had their hand up. I don't see it anymore. Okay, well, thank you everyone, much appreciated. Thank you so much to the Symbios team as well for your hospitality, and also for everybody else who's joined here tonight. I really enjoyed the session. Thank you for the questions, and please make sure you keep getting better in your supply chain. This is what it's all about. Looking forward to chatting again soon. Thanks, Shireen.
Thank you.
There is another question in Q&A. How many types of supply chain? What are the types briefly?
I think he left.
How many types for supply chain? Yeah, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. I wonder if maybe Shireen, you can help me on this one.
So I think we can talk about just general types of supply chains, because usually in the SCOR and the ACM, we refer to 3 types of supply chain, either make to stock or make to order or ETO, engineer to order. Basically, because to create a unified model of supply chain, you need to have something that everyone can refer to. Because in supply chain, I think we can talk about the flows of supply chain and how we can manage it in different environments. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, those are interesting ways to define a supply chain. I mean, this is very much, also SCOR defines these quite nicely, right? So make to stock, for example, we would have different inventory policies with a make to stock supply chain. We would have different metrics, different targets of the metrics, and different KPIs potentially with a supply chain like that. That's where we need to provide inventory into the channels, right? And have it available in case someone buys it. Make to order is completely different, because now we're waiting for a customer order before we trigger certain aspects within the supply chain. So for that, we wouldn't hold any stock, right? Or we'd keep more of the raw material stock, for example, have different inventory policies for that versus what we have in the finished goods. So this is an example. Engineered to order, completely different as well. But yes, the different types of supply chain, and I think also what that question was maybe alluding to is looking at how we segment the supply chain. By what factors do we segment it? And this is important for us to, first of all, just define it, right? I mean, this is how I would do it if I was starting off looking at any new business, right? Is how do we define those things? What are the biggest drivers to our success? And how do we change the decision points we make and the policies we have to support the different supply chain? But the fact that we mentioned there are different ones in that question is a good first start. So thanks for that.
And the metrics and priorities change by your type of supply chain. And that's what we have it depends on your supply chain. If it's make to stock, your first priority, it should be always in perfect order fulfillment. Okay. If you are in another supply chain where you are engineer to order, you will put a lot of emphasis on supply chain response time, on your lead time. So it depends. It depends on your supply chain. It depends on product life cycle. And we usually highlight the details of this during our programs of CSCP and SCOR and supply chain operation reference training. Have you mentioned brands that people can access SCOR for free on ASCM?
Yes, I did. And I hope they heard me on that one, because that's it's completely free. And I think, and I showed the just a view of what the SCOR model looks like. It's a score.ascm.org. I will put it into the chat as well right now. And all you need to do is actually just create an Apex ID if you do not already have it. Okay, I see it's, thank you so much, Zainab, for adding it to the chat there. So really, it's so easy, and there's so much information in that model. I mean, it's absolutely great. So definitely have a look at that if you haven't already.
And it's not only the model of SCOR. We talk about free access to sustainability standards, right?
That's right. That's right. And also the digital capabilities model as well, which I think for a lot of people on the call would be quite interesting to look at in more detail. So that's also available dcm.ascm.org for that one.
Yes, so we are proud and we are thankful to ASCM for all the great work you're doing with voluntary people doing such work, because it's very important that we can get access to the standards so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I would like to thank you, Grant. Thank everyone who has spent his evening with us tonight. Thank you, our team. Thank you, Iman. Thank you, Zainab. Thank you, everyone. And have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Much appreciated. Bye-bye.
Enjoy your weekend.
You too.
Yeah, thank you.